Good evening. We are here for another program in our Women in Power series, and I'm delighted that tonight we have Rita Little-Scott with us, who is the Senior Vice President and General Manager of WCSC TV Live 5 News. Is that the full title?
I've
got the full title going. I have to tell you, in light of transparency, my first job was at Channel 5, WCSC TV. And back in the dark ages, when they didn't have teleprompters, when you still did everything with 16mm film, which is what I learned how to edit. But it was an amazing experience to learn the impact of broadcast media, even back then, because the basics of it haven't changed at all. So I want to tell you a little bit about Rita ahead of time, but then we're going to work through some of the more interesting things in her life instead of reading her resume, as it were. You've been really active in the community. You came here what year?
94.
94. So I'm trying to do the math.
19.
Almost 19 years.
Yeah.
And during that time, you've gotten involved with so many community organizations, including the Health Sciences Foundation of the Medical University, the Charleston Education Network, Trident United Way. You just did a spot for them. The Trident United Way's Women's Leadership Council, the Charleston Police Fund, and of course Debbie's Kids. And I think we'll talk about this a little later on, but the International African American Museum, which I know is near and dear to your heart.
It's very dear.
You're also a member of the Nielsen Alliance.
Yes.
What is that?
Nielsen is a rating service that rates all television stations across the country. And they asked me for a small market, they wanted a voice. And what they do is, in this market, it's diary. So they call volunteers and send out a diary and ask them, who's your favorite station? What are you watching now? What do your children watch? And so Nielsen basically gives us our ratings, and we live by those numbers.
Because that's how you set your advertising rates.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. In 1999, Mayor Riley in the city of Charleston honored you as the first African-American woman to become a general manager of an affiliate TV station, naming October 21st in her honor. So this coming October 1st, we all need to think about Rita. But here's the thing. I grew up in Charleston. I don't remember when CSC went on the air, but it was the first television station to go on the air here in Charleston. WCSC, wonderful, Charleston, South Carolina. But I do know that ever since then, come right on in, get yourself a glass of wine, have some cheese, that since then you've always been number one.
We have.
The number one station in the market, and that is huge. Particularly when you think about the impact of the other networks and now the impact of cable. So we're going to start at the very beginning, before you made this amazing thing happen and kept it going. Where were you born?
High Point, North Carolina.
And did you grow up there?
I did, up until 18.
And what was it like?
It was a small town. My parents owned a funeral home. So we actually lived in the funeral home in the business district of the black community. And we had an opportunity to see just an amazing life, because all of your black businesses, as well as your schools and everything, took place right in that one community. So it was just a life of having not only our parents, but having a community, that village, that really looked after us. And it was small enough that we knew everybody. Right. And that everybody knew us too, so we couldn't get into too much trouble.
Tell me about your parents. Your mom, did your mom work with your dad in the business?
My mother worked for my dad, but my dad also had, he had the funeral home, but he also had a job in the manufacturing with one of the companies, furniture companies, because having 6 kids, he needed both incomes. So he would work all day, but the beautiful part was he would always come home for lunch, and he and my mom would have that time together, and then come back for dinner. We all had to eat together, and then he would do the funeral home at night.
Where are you in the birth order?
My twin sisters are 2 years older, and then it's me, 2 younger sisters, and a brother. But we lost our baby brother about 5 years ago.
I'm sorry.
It's 5 girls now.
5 girls. And did you get into trouble as a child?
Constantly. I was
the middle child.
I was what they call the fast one.
What did that mean?
That meant that whatever went wrong, Rita did it.
How would you describe yourself as a child? I mean, were you a happy child? Were you a studious child? I mean, when you look back on little Rita, what does she look like? What's she like?
And I have a little Rita as a granddaughter, so I see myself all over again, and she's so much like me. But what I felt that I was the one that was very creative, loved doing plays and having theater and singing and just loved being in plays and dance and all of the things. So just a beautiful life because my mother pushed that as well. So whatever we wanted to do in life, my parents got behind it, and they made sure that you could do anything you wanted to do, but education was the one thing that was always taught to us, that you will go to college, you will do the things you need to do, so it was understood.
Yeah. Did you have a nickname?
No, just Rita.
Okay. Talk about your friends. What were they like?
Oh, my sisters are really my best friends. And I have other girlfriends we love to be surrounded by. And I had a lot of boyfriends. But I liked to challenge the guys. So just like with band, they told me that I couldn't be in the band and play trombone. Oh, of course, that was, you can't tell me no. So I decided, you know what? Not only am I going to play trombone, but I'm going to be first trombonist. And I'm going to swing it in the marching band just as good as the guys, and turn it and flip it around and do. So I played trombone until it started denting my lips.
When you were a child, what did you think your life was going to look like when you were older?
I thought I was going to be on stage. That was one of those dreams that I thought, I wanted to be a big actress because I love television, I love the movies, and it was always something exciting. I love thinking about the world, a big world. I love traveling and seeing, but traveling more in books. So that would be my travel, is take a book and read it and find a place that you would love to go. So I always knew that those were the things I wanted to do as I grew older.
Do you have any favorite story from your childhood?
The Pink Dress was one of my favorite stories, and it was about a young girl who wanted this pink dress for the prom, but she had to work and figure out how to get it, and then it was just one of those things that she went on a journey with this dress. And I love paper dolls and doing things of that nature, so it sort of caught me that I love being a little girl. I like frilly things. I loved Prindle slips, and I loved Shirley Temple curls and all of those fun things at the time as a young girl.
And I have to interject, you actually allowed a photographer into your closet, I think, for a Charleston Magazine article, and you wouldn't believe it. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing. So you kept that. Probably a few crinolines still, right?
Kept that, but what the interesting thing, being 5 girls, we lived in a funeral home upstairs, and we had one closet. So all of the things in the closet belonged to all of us until the day I got married. And then I went up to pack, and all my sister says, no, that's mine. No, that's mine. So I came downstairs with this little suitcase and said, I guess we're going to have to go shopping.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about school for a minute. Did you enjoy school?
I did. I loved school. Studying came easy for me. It was a little harder for some of my other sisters. So it was expected by my parents that I did bring home straight A's because they said, it's easier for you. Yeah. So as much as I loved school, I always felt like, I felt almost like they punished me because I could get it. So I had to do the A's, but it didn't, it really paid off because they pushed me and they wouldn't allow me to just get by.
Did you play any sports?
I did. I ran track, swam, wasn't very good at basketball, but I went out anyway and tried it. But cheerleading, things of that nature were the fun things.
Was there a teacher or multiple teachers that had a strong influence on you?
Oh, definitely. Even from elementary school, junior high, high school, our teachers were really the ones who instilled in us what you needed to do in order to go into careers. And one teacher in particular set me down one day, I think I was maybe 17 at the time, and she said, don't settle for anything salary-wise until you can reach the top of that chart of what the salary should be. So she said, I'm a teacher, I'm on a fixed salary. Yeah. You don't have to do that.
It's so interesting that you say don't settle. We've heard that from many of our other women who've been interviewed for this series. There's definitely a theme there, and to get that early is so important. So you graduated from high school.
Yes.
And what was your next path?
Well, I got married right out of high school, and I married the star basketball player in the town.
And you were the cheerleader?
I was not the cheerleader for that particular. He was at High Point College, and actually he was doing his student teaching in my high school. So my senior year of high school. So we got married, and that was the beginning of. He ended up playing ABA basketball and then went on to be an NBA coach. So that was part of my journey, was the world of basketball, as well as finding my own way at the same time.
So did you have to put your education on hold while he did that?
What I did was I started at High Point College, then we ended up at Appalachian State, but in between we traveled other places, and so Appalachian State was where I could finish. And so what I did was wherever he was, I found either courses or did something to further my career, or didn't really have a career. At that time I was banking, you know, I was a teller in a bank, but I always wanted my own. So I had a job wherever we went. And that wasn't too, some of the other guys didn't like the idea that his wife was working and all of the other wives were sort of stay at home. And so I sort of talked them into starting their own thing as well.
Oh, you rabble-rouser, you. Oh, an early feminist. You gotta love it. Did you have kids during that period?
I did. In fact, the kids were born throughout this. I've got 2 sons, and they're now living in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've got the 2 grandbabies. So we had an amazing life. Lived in cities like Cleveland, Chicago, Salt Lake City, Utah, which was so all of these experiences were different and amazing. I remember the first trip was to Utah, away from my family for the first time, and I cried like a baby. And then, because I'd never been away from family, and then to go into a town that the Mormon religion was the dominant religion, and of course women were sort of subservient to a degree, so it was a different lifestyle totally. It was a tough time for me to try and figure that out.
Well, I'm realizing that you're traveling all the time, you have jobs, you have 2 children, and you're going to school.
And he's on the road coaching or playing, yes.
So what kind of work-life balance was there during those early years?
You learned that you knew that I had a window of time that I could allow to work, and then a window of time to be a mom, a window of time to be the player's wife or the coach's wife. So, you know, for me it was putting a change of clothes, because I was going from some television sales to basketball games to entertaining clients after a basketball game. So many days it would be 12 o'clock. But it was, I didn't know anything else. It was fun.
Was it during this period that you got involved in broadcasting?
I did. In fact, I got involved in broadcasting. We left Appalachian, came back to High Point, our hometown, because the team he was playing for was in Greensboro, and Greensboro and High Point are right there together. And I applied for a position in sales. But during this time, we're still dealing with the civil rights movement and that era.
Talk a little bit about that and your school, for example. Was your school integrated, your high school?
High school was all black until my senior year, and that was the year that they was forced integration. So my senior year in high school was an integrated school. It was a tough year to leave the school that you'd known all your life and go into this new environment, but we knew that that's what we had been fighting for. So it was a new challenge, a new opportunity, and it was different, but it was exciting at the same time.
So you come home where you know the community, and you're applying for a job as a sales rep for a television station, and there were very few women, if any, at that time, doing that, much less African American women. So tell us the story of how that came down.
Well, when I applied, here I am, a mother. I've got 2 children. I'm just coming home, and I walk in and I apply, and they called me and said, "I'm sorry, but we don't have women in this position. And you know, how can you sell when you've got 2 children? And so I'm sorry, but you know, you can't have this job."
And what did you do, Rita?
I knew that they were applying for a renewal of their license, so we took a class action suit.
Had other women had that experience?
Not at that level, because that was the first time that another woman had ever applied. And then to have a black female to apply for a job that they had never opened that door for any women, period, and they were going to have to be forced to do so. So we knew everything had to be forced in order to open the doors. So we took the class action suit, but all I asked for was the job. I didn't ask for monies, I didn't ask for anything, but just give me the opportunity. So the first few weeks of work were...
And you won.
I won.
You won.
And I also asked that the general sales manager be the one to train me, because I knew if I failed, he failed. So I knew then also that in order to make this job work, they were going to give me the worst accounts. They were not going to give me anything. So I took...
They wanted you to fail.
They wanted me to fail. So I took one of the lists that no one had called on for like 5 years. And the first time I went down to call the company Cheerwine in Cheerwine in Charlotte. And I called them, and the gentleman said, "You know what? We have not heard from anyone in 5 years. Please come down and talk with me." And I walked in and I laid out what we had to offer, and he gave me a $50,000 schedule.
Do y'all understand what that means? I mean, we're talking selling advertising on television, and he bought $50,000. Okay.
And this was for a 3-month buy. And
that's a lot of ads.
Oh, that was amazing at that time. So I came back naive, thinking that was what everybody did. So when I walked back in, it really opened the guy's eyes. All of the other sellers and all of that. So they realized that, you know what, we've been wrong to try and block the opportunity for women. And they all embraced who I was, what I was there to do, and we all became friends, and we really had a good time.
Did they hire other women after that?
They did. And now in the sales world, there are probably more women than there are men.
In both radio and TV.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So from there, where did you go?
From there, I went on to Cleveland, because he then went to Cleveland. He became a coach for the Cavaliers, and I went to WJW. And in fact, The general sales manager who trained me ended up in Cleveland at a station 3 weeks before we found out we were going.
And he did hire you.
He hired me again. I was one of his best salespeople, so he hired me again in Cleveland. And then from Cleveland, I became a regional sales, so it became more agency, so bigger sales, working with major clients. And then we went to Chicago. So he then was with the Bulls. I got to Chicago, wanted then to be in national sales because I had done local sales, I've done regional sales. So I just decided to go to ABC and knock on the door and tell them I lived here in Chicago now and that they should hire me.
And they did?
And I couldn't believe it. They said, you mean you just walked into town, you called, I just walked in, knocked on the door, sat down with them. Next thing I knew, they had me on a plane to New York to meet at the top of the ABC, and they said, anybody who's that gutsy, we're going to give you an opportunity.
Where'd you get the guts?
I think from my parents and understanding that they instilled in all of us that you make your own dreams. Every morning we would get up. My dad would say, remember what you dreamed because when we come home tonight at dinner, we're going to discuss your dreams. And we would, at dinner that evening, all of us would have to talk about what our dream was. One sister wanted to be a millionaire, and that's all she talked about every day. We knew she was going to be a millionaire. And so when it was time for her dream to come true, she opened a furniture store, and she was able to take off. And this was the first time a black female had owned furniture and was working the furniture market and doing things of that nature.
Right, of course.
So it was just, I think he instilled in us and my mom that if you dream it, it can happen. But you've got to dream big and not be afraid. You can't fear. It's just, even with the civil rights, we were not allowed at restaurants, we were not allowed at water fountains, but we knew that wasn't right. And we fought for that right.
Well, High Point was one of the epicenters of the civil rights movement. Did you get involved?
Oh, totally involved. My father couldn't stop us. I mean, it was like a pull in us that we had to be in the marches. We were hosed. We had guns pointed at us. But you didn't fear dying because it was anything for your freedom. Because they didn't have a right to tell me no. And that was something that, watching death too, you were born, you live a span of life, and then you are no longer here. So you don't have but a small span to decide what you're going to do and do it. My parents had a guy one day, this particular man died, had no family, had no friends. So they asked us to go to the funeral, but to have some people there. Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and the obituary said, tomorrow. Tomorrow he was going to help someone with this and do all of these wonderful things, but he died today. And I thought, oh my goodness, how do you live for tomorrow and not do today what you need to do because you don't know about tomorrow? That's not promised.
No.
The only thing you have is now. And you have to move now and make it happen.
So Chicago.
Chicago, got the job, worked in the national market, had an amazing life. He was with the Bulls, so we got an opportunity to be with Michael Jordan and watch basketball in some of the best that you can imagine. But I came home one afternoon. He's on the road coaching. I'm downtown. And my son, who was then around 13, we were living in the suburbs. And I came home and the house was pitch dark. And when I walked in, he flipped the light on over his head, and he said, if I have to live by myself, I need an apartment. And I thought, oh my goodness. He's crying out that both of us can't be doing this and not giving him the attention that he needs. So at that point, I decided that I needed to take him back to North Carolina, to family, to home, to be where he needed to grow as well. So I called a realtor, and called a friend now back at WGHP, a friend who's now the general sales manager, and I called him and I said, Quinn, you have a local sales manager's job available. I'm thinking of coming back. You got the job. So I didn't realize that he wanted me to start in 2 weeks. So I put the house on the market. I go to the grocery store, and when I get back, I've got a full offer on the house. So it was like, you know that you're blessed. You know you're doing the right thing when it just comes. And you're not forcing or doing anything, you're just opening to the experience. So my husband at the time said, are you leaving me? What are you doing? And I said, no, I need to go for Travis. He needs to be at home. He needs to be around family. He needs stability. And it was a good move for him. And it was a good move for me, because then the Charlotte Hornets moved to Charlotte, and he now comes to Charlotte and ends up with the position with the Hornets. And now I leave High Point, and we moved to Charlotte, and that became home for 5 years, and that's when I went to work for WBTV and stayed there as their local sales manager and their national sales manager, and was able to train a lot of young salespeople, and it was just a great experience.
So how did you end up in Charleston?
Well, I decided that he wanted to continue to travel and move to other teams, and I had gotten back to North Carolina, and I decided the Carolinas that was where I wanted to stay. So he went on his way, and I ended up in Charleston. I found out that there was a station for sale in Charleston, WCSC, and that my company were looking to expand and buying stations, and I told them about this station. And I told them, I'll go down and help run it if you buy it.
So you were working for the company that bought
That's exactly
Channel 5?
Right. In Charlotte.
Wow.
And they came, and I came down as their national sales manager. And when we moved from downtown on East Bay out to where we are on Charlie Hall Boulevard, I then moved up to general sales manager. And I had a general manager he was very difficult to work with. He was sort of the old school. And I was going to leave the company. And they asked me, please don't do that. What would it take? And I said, well, I don't know. I mean, this is something that you're going to have to figure out, because I'm not going to work in an environment that's not conducive to my growth. So they made me the general manager. So,
it's effective negotiation, don't you think? I mean, totally effective. Wow. And how did the rest of the station respond to that?
They were very happy at the time,
good.
because they also were feeling and I don't want to really put a lot of effort into that, but it was just the wrong manager for us at that time.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, one or two or even three of the stories that have happened either locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, that have had a real impact on you, and where you have had to make challenging decisions about the coverage.
Floyd was coming towards us. I had become general manager about 3 months before the first hurricane. And we had done hurricane planning, trying to figure out what's going to happen, because after Hugo, you knew that you wanted to try and stay on the air as long as you possibly could, but you also needed to have an exit plan in case the storm was moving so strong that it could put everybody in danger. And I'm thinking, I get into the conference room and they're saying that this huge storm, it could be a category 4 or 5, people were leaving, what are we going to do? And I'm thinking, okay, their families, they have, what are we going to do? So I said, you know what, bring your animals, we're going to ride through this storm and we're going to make it happen. So it was a very intense time, because they didn't reverse the highways, so now you have all of these massive people and all of this turmoil, and we had to give the news as far as what was happening, how it was happening, and in what sequence. And for so many of them to hear the voices that they grew up with, to hear Debbie Chard and Bill Sharp talk through to them and let them know what to do, and Bill Walsh saying to them, okay, here's how you're going to do this, because we have radio partners that we would bring in as well, so we knew even if we went off the air that we had the radio and we had their voices, we had the voice to give them the information that they needed. So it was a calming, having all of these qualified people around to make the decisions on what we needed to do and how to get the best information out.
How did you handle 911?
I was sitting in my office that morning, and I've got like 6 different television sets in front of me, trying to make sure that we keep abreast on everything that's happening. And I did see the first plane, but I'm thinking that
an accident.
Like everybody, you know, and I got up and walked back to the newsroom, and I said, what was that? And that by that time, the other plane was coming through, and we knew then that it was just going to be the worst day of our lives. We went on the air and let everybody know that this had happened, but we also were waiting for CBS. We are a CBS affiliate. We knew CBS would take over, but even CBS, because they lost towers, especially in New York and everything, because most of the transmitters and the towers were on these tall buildings. They had to figure out how they were going to be able to air back all of what was going on. So they took over from there. Of course, we had to do the local portion of how it affected all of us. So for many of the people who died, some of them were Charlestonians, and those stories had to be told as well. But you don't ever get over anything of that nature.
Talk a little bit about the impact of cable. Growing up, we had 4 stations. We had Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, and Channel 7, ETV. And now there are 300, something like that.
Well, and then you had all of the other networks even before that, with Fox and the CWs and the WBs and all of that. And then with cable, you had this onslaught of stations that were coming with specialties, sports specials, cooking specials, living specials, and it started segmenting what we call broadcast dollars, because they were taking just a small piece of the dollars off, because at that time it was more cable subscriptions and they didn't have ratings, so most advertisers were not spending a lot of money. And then their ratings began to grow little by little, and then of course the onslaught of satellite, and now you've got web television. So there are just so many choices that you have to make sure that you can specialize in keeping your audience strong. And the way we do it is through local news. Most cities, the whole broadcast area, they want to know what's going on in my market, in my backyard. And you want to know when it's happening and why it's happening. Also, you want to know what the weather is going to do. So how is it going to affect my life? And that's where local news becomes very important in the home.
But you made a very interesting decision on that, to go from the traditional format where you might have a morning news show, maybe a midday, and then evening, and later in the evening. You went with pretty much an all-day format.
Right.
How did you come to that?
You realize how important this is to the world, and you've got to let that information just flow. So you block off all commercials, you just let it go, because this is major news that's happening, whether it's internationally, locally, regionally. If it's the big story that's affecting people's lives, they need to see it right then and there, what's happening and why.
You added a whole nother a whole nother station, basically, a whole nother channel, right? The Live 5 Plus.
And Bounce.
And Bounce. Talk a little bit about that, because I mean, the other networks have not done that here.
No. With Spectrum, you remember the whole digital explosion where we then became HD, high definition. So we go away from the analog, which was just the pixels, to this high def, which is indefinite as far as what you can do with it. So the spectrum that came from high def, we could still have WCSC, and then we could then also program another station, so we could do 3 stations at the same time with the spectrum that we got when we did go to high def. So we have WCSC on 5.1, Live 5 Plus, which are a lot of syndicated shows on 5.2, and we do a lot of community shows on that, Sharp Focus,
right.
Bounce Around Charleston. So it's where we can go and do more informational stories about the city and what is happening. And then Bounce is a network that Martin Luther King III and Andrew Young started out of Atlanta. And it's basically black-oriented programming, but of course it's programming for everyone, but it's more of the movies and local shows that specifically target more of the African American market. And there were 48 Hispanic television stations on cable, only 2 black, one being BET,
really?
And there are 2 other, but the difference was that there was a need for more programming that's specialized, and that's how they came to starting Bounce.
Wow. Talk about the community a little bit and your involvement personally, but also Channel 5's involvement. I mean, I think there's some amazing things that you've built up over the years that the community expects, not the least of which is Debbie's Kids and some of those other things. How do you make those decisions about what you're going to support in the community?
Well, we try to support as many nonprofits as we possibly can, even if we don't get behind the effort completely. But what we do is we try to give news time, we try to promote, we try to drive people for volunteers or the needs, or to help with their fundraisers, or do the things that we can. We can't do everything, but what we do is we try to get back into what are the things that are going to touch the majority of the lives. So like Trident United Way and their 211, it's touching so many lives. We can get behind that effort. Debbie's Kids, Debbie Chard, our main anchor, found a need that there were so many children that were not getting toys at Christmas. And she wanted to get behind the effort, so we use the platform to help drive as many toy donations and partnerships with Salvation Army. So we try to deal with as many of the big needs in this community as possible.
Let's talk a little bit about race. You grew up in that whole civil rights environment. I'm sure that over the years you've experienced different kinds of attitudes. Do you see Charleston as being progressive on that front? And have things improved or maybe maintained the status quo since you came here in 1994?
Well, I feel that Channel 5 especially has embraced diversity of all, because I think everything should mirror the community. And my feeling is everyone in this community is important. So what we have seen is that by adding a strong black male talent like Raphael James, that he has a real presence not only in everyone's lives, but those women who may not have a father or a husband. And he fills a lot of those needs as far as he's given information. That's what we're looking at, are trying to make sure that we have role models that really do reflect this community. I've seen in the time that I'm here, as we can see some of our friends who are here as well, we're pulling a really beautiful part of the country, because Charleston being the best city in the world, you know, everybody is finding it, and everybody is finding something that they enjoy here. So I think that you have seen a major growth in understanding the needs. I still worry about the education here because I feel that there's a lot more that needs to be done in the educational system, and but I have seen a lot of improvement. The schools that are there now that are beautiful schools that are providing great education, and schools that are having troubles like Burke. The community is involved in trying to make those schools stronger. So we can't take our eye off of it.
What are some of your life lessons? What do you come out with? You know, if you could tell these young women here things to look out for, road bumps to be aware of, and challenges, but also an attitude, being gutsy.
There are many things and people who come for a reason, a season, or a lifetime, and know that it's okay. I wished I knew today that you don't have to hold on to everything that doesn't really belong for you. You may think it does, but it really doesn't. So let it go. Let go of anything that is strangling you or holding you down, and allow the real love that you have inside to be the guide. Let that be the guide. And you don't have to hold on to things that you know are not good for you. And whatever that is. And it comes in all different shapes and forms, and you know, the mind sort of keeps you blocked in with, well, you know, you've got to think about this, you've got to do this. You really don't. If you just let go and just let life be, it's just a wonderful place to be.
That's a hard lesson when you're young.
It is.
So what does the future hold for you?
Wow. I'm enjoying life every day. I get up, I go to a great television station. Yes, I see a lot of things during the day that pull at your heart. There's no doubt about that. But if you can make a difference, then you do whatever you can to make that difference. And I see myself, as long as we're giving the best we can with the time that we have, I want to be able to do that for the future as well. I love life. I love having a good time. I think we were born at the best time you could be born. Look at the changes in the last 60 years. I mean, I look back and I go, wow, things are happening constantly. And women are taking control and in charge and are doing amazing jobs at everything that we touch. And don't be afraid to want that and go for that. And don't let anybody say no. They can say it, but you can still maneuver and open those doors. Someone was saying the other day, I know when I came into the business world, women were wearing neckties and they were dressing basically like men.
Shoulder pads.
And I just refused to do that. That wasn't me. I have to be who I feel that I am internally. I mean, the pink dress was a big deal in my younger life. I wasn't going to put on a black suit. So you just have to be whatever it is that you feel that you are.
Just one last question. What's your greatest extravagance?
I love to shop, you know that. Shoes, clothes, travel. I mean, you treat yourself nice. That's the way I look at life as well. Just treat yourself, because if you're happy with the things that you do, then that's what it's all about.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rita. This
Thank
has been very
you.
enlightening.